The years passed, and I was so industrious that my shelves were now filled with handmade playthings, and I could see that I must travel to wider fields than the great ark had showed me years before. So I loaded a great sack of all kinds of toys, and I slung it on my back, and I started off on a longer trip than ever before. And when the sack was empty, I went back again to the Laughing Valley, and once more I filled it to the brim. This time I followed another road into a different part of the country, and I carried happiness to many children who had never before known a toy. Now, after a third journey, my store of toys became exhausted, and I sat about making a fresh supply. Now, during this time, I acquired several new ideas for toys. Those who could not say dolly would call for a doll. And many of the little fellows had musical interests. So I made a number of toys, drums, and whistles and horns. Ha, ha, ha. I will make new toys that bring new joys for little girls and deserving boys with a ha, ha, ho, ho, he. One bright morning, I looked from my window and I saw two of the deer from the forest walking toward my house. I opened the door and I called to them, "Good morning, Flossie. Tell me, how are you able to walk so easily over the snow?" "It's frozen hard," she answered. "Why, perhaps you could carry my pack of toys to the children, and I could ride upon your back." Flossie and Glossie replied, "Our backs are not strong enough to bear your weight. But if you had a sledge, you could harness us to it, and we might be able to draw you easily." "Ha ha! Why, that's it. I'll make a sledge. If I do, will you agree to draw me if I do?" And they answered together, "We'll have to go and ask the Knooks for permission." And Flossie and Glossie returned with the good news. And then they asked me, "How do you intend to guide us?" "Why, I have cords, and I will fasten them to your spreading antlers, one to the right and the other to the left, and these will be my reins. Are you ready?" And I seated myself on the stool, and I placed the sack of toys at my feet. "Are you ready? Away we go! Whee!" Oh, the moon shone brightly to light our way. Oh, the deer liked it better at night, for they were timid about meeting men. And now all the dwellers in the town and farmhouses were sound asleep. But a new difficulty presented itself. Oh no! The doors are locked, and I cannot get in to leave my toys. Glossie looked around and said, "Why don't you climb down the chimney? Hold fast, and we'll take you to the roof." So I slung the pack of toys over my shoulder, and we flew to the roof. And by placing my hands and knees against the sides, I crept down until I had reached the fireplace. I found myself in a large sitting room where I placed my first present. Why, at the next home, sugar plums were dancing into the children's heads, and I crept softly from room to room, and I delivered the toys. In the next house, there were two brothers fast asleep, and here I placed upon the bed a drum, a horn, and a wooden elephant. And I climbed the chimney again, and I seated myself on the sledge. "Can you find another chimney?" "Easy enough," replied Glossie and Flossie, and down to the edge of the roof they raced and leaped through the air to the top of the next building. With a huge, old-fashioned chimney stood, and I made the trip down this chimney, and I did my work. And when I was back on the roof, I called, "Onward, friends!" And at last the supply of toys was exhausted, and now Glossie and Flossie asked, "What is that gray streak in the sky?" "Why, it's the coming of the dawn of day." "Good gracious, we have to be home before daybreak, or the Knooks will never let us come again." And we raced for the Laughing Valley. "Ha ha! We're home!" And in the east, on the edge of Mersey, and I watched Glossie and Flossie disappearing into the forest. I thought that none of the children would ever know where toys come from, but kindly deeds are sure to bring fame. For miles and miles in every direction, people were talking. Have you heard about Claus? Claus has wonderful gifts for children. Oh, he's sweet and generous. But how did he get in? Wondered the children. And the mothers, watching the glad faces of their dear ones, whispered, Good Claus is no mortal man, but assuredly a saint. A saint, said another, with bowed head, has no need to unlock doors if it pleases him to enter our houses. He shall be known as Saint Nicholas. And afterwards, when a child was naughty or disobedient, its mother would say, Well, you must pray to the good Saint Nick for forgiveness. Saint Nicholas does not like naughty children, and unless you repent, he will bring you no more pretty toys. Let it be known, I would not have approved this speech. You see, I brought toys to the children because they are little and helpless, and because I love them. I know that the best children are sometimes naughty, and that the naughty ones are often good. And it's this way with children the world over. And that's how I became Santa Claus. Morning had broken as I returned from my night ride, and the chief Nook, who was the chief guardian of the deer, complained that I had kept Glossie and Flossie behind daybreak. The Nook shouted, It was 1 minute after daybreak, and that is as bad as an hour. Glossie and Flossie will suffer terribly for your disobedience. Oh, I begged, do not do that. It was my fault. But the Prince of the Nooks would not listen to my excuse. So I entered the forest to consult Miss Seal about rescuing the good deer from punishment. And to my delight, I found my old friend, the master woodsman, seated in a circle with the nymphs. And Orc listened to the story of the night journey to the children. Oh, I do not wish my friends Flossie and Glossie to be punished. They were only 1 minute late, and they ran swifter than birds fly to get home before daybreak. Orc spoke in soft tones to the Prince of the Nooks. I beg that you permit Claus to use their services whenever he pleases. But the Nook complained. Deer are deer, and nothing but deer. No one harnesses deer because they are free. It would degrade, my dear, to labor for Claus, who is only a man. Orc spoke. Call Glossie and Flossie, and he asked, Do you, Flossie and Glossie, object to drawing the sledge for Claus? And both deer replied, No, indeed. We enjoyed the trip. And we tried to get home before daybreak, but we were 1 minute too late. And Orc spoke, You are forgiven for that delay. The Prince of the Nooks spoke next. I will permit the deer to go with Claus once a year on Christmas Eve, provided they always return to the forest by daybreak. Orc was satisfied, and Glossie and Flossie ran home, kicking up their heels with every step. And I asked the master, When is Christmas Eve? Orc grinned. In about 10 days. Oh, then I cannot use the deer this year. I fear I shall not have enough time to make my toys. Oh, the master said, Go home and try. Just do your best. So I went back to my workroom, and I worked every day, and my workshop was filling with toys. And then it was the day before Christmas Eve, and Glossie and Flossie came by, and I said, Will you be ready for the journey tonight? And they nodded yes. And that night I turned to my team and said, We must go to another direction this night. We must travel fast and work quickly, for my sacks are full with toys and running over the brim. And just as the moon arose, we dashed out of Laughing Valley and across the plain and over the hills to the south, with a ho, 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 and a hee, 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 over the frozen snow, as fast as we can go. Ho, ho, ho. And the deer liked the sound of my deep bass voice, and they kept time to the song with their hoofbeats. And as soon as we stopped, I left a present for every child in the house, and we traveled where we found children I have never yet visited. And now the sacks were almost empty at last, and we headed home. And Glossy and Flossie led the sledge, and they fled nonstop swiftness to the Laughing Valley with the ho, 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 hee. Oh, I was so wearied by my night's work that I threw myself upon my bed and I fell into a deep slumber.